In order to achieve the overall interests of the country, can we choose any means necessary? Or rather, national interests. Can it override law and morality? Avoiding. We can divide into two viewpoints. The first viewpoint believes in the supremacy of law. This viewpoint emphasizes that law should be the highest standard for state actions. Any action by a country must comply with international law and domestic law, even if it conflicts with one's own national interests. This can prevent conflicts with international political order, chaos in the international political landscape, 7771, preventing greater evil and disasters from arising, thus creating a healthy and interactive international relationship. This is the valuable consensus established by humanity through 2 world wars, and it is thanks to this consensus that we live in a relatively peaceful era. The second viewpoint believes in the supremacy of national interests. National interests are the primary consideration in all political actions, in matters of national security. In national security, at times when the survival of a nation is threatened, any country has the right to violate international law, or take actions against general moral principles. Because safeguarding the interests of the country is the government's primary responsibility. This kind of thinking is typical of national rationalism. It is also supported by many nationalists. And when this thinking develops to an extreme, national rationalism can turn into militarism. Nationalism can also be distorted into populism. We can refer to the former Nazi Germany and militaristic Japan. During that historical period, Mandy is done. National interests are demanded, are often used to justify their own aggressive actions. Although the emphasis of these two views is different, they also have certain conflicts with each other, but they both have a common starting point, which is a realist perspective. They do not directly advocate the morality of the state. Because in the objective environment, there are many conflicts that cannot be avoided, such as the conflict between fact and value, the conflict between what is and what should be, the conflict between politics and ethics. This is why modern political science has such an understanding. All originated from Machiavelli's 2 works, one of which is the much discussed and misunderstood, The Prince. The other is the less valued, Discourses. This is not to say that the various conflicts mentioned above originated from this. In fact, they have always existed throughout history. Machiavelli just chose to expose these conflicts to the sunlight, causing moral discomfort among people. So it caused moral discomfort among people. And what Machiavelli faced at that time was an extremely complex political environment. In 1494, Charles VIII started the Italian Wars. At that time, France had already established absolute monarchy. England had also ended the Wars of the Roses. Spain conquered Granada. The Italian region was in a state of chaos and division. Machiavelli's homeland had to face invasions from France, the Holy Roman Empire, and Spain. The situation of being invaded by 3 countries. The Republic of Florence collapsed in 1512. The return of the Medici family, signifying Italy's return to dictatorship. In 1515, Machiavelli presented a book to the Medici family. He hoped that the current rulers could save the troubled Italy through strong centralized power, breaking free from dependence on mercenary groups, establishing a strong city-state army, safeguarding Italy's territorial security. Even how a monarch should be involved in military actions, he had to write separately. It can be said, Machiavelli was deeply concerned for Florence. In the final chapter of The Discourses, he quoted Livy as saying, "For those who are forced to wage war, war is justice. For those who have no hope but to take up arms, weapons are sacred." And in the final chapter of The Prince, he surprisingly changes his previous stern and cautious tone, loudly calling on the prince to save the storm-tossed Italy. Machiavelli believes liberating Italy from barbarians is a just and rightful demand. Here he lists 3 examples. The first being Moses, who led the Jews out of Egypt. The second being Cyrus, the founder of the Persian Empire. The third being Theseus, the founder of the Athenian Republic. Although in the 16th century, there was no concept of nationalism, but the 3 examples he lists all have strong nationalist undertones. Machiavelli believes, for the great national ideal of Italy, Italians even have to accept a more cruel slavery than the Jews, even more ruthless oppression than the Persians, a more miserable wandering than the Athenians. Based on years of observation of politics, in such a complex situation, Machiavelli is deeply disappointed in the moral consciousness of human nature. Family. He began to realize, all political powers of states originate from a form of violence, and all states will, after seizing power, justify the violent means they have used. This is completely contrary to classical liberalism, whether it is Plato or Aristotle. They both believe that politics is governed by universal reason. The core of politics can only be justice. Even Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, this claim of the Christian traditional view of state politics also requires a certain moral legitimacy. However, Machiavelli believed, in order to achieve the overall interests of the state, one can do whatever it takes. In chapters 6 and 9 of The Prince, we can see Machiavelli's understanding of conflict is unprecedented. Machiavelli believed that conflict is an inherent gift of the state. Conflict is not evil. The essence of conflict is a state having various groups and entities, each with their own interests and demands. Social conflict can improve corruption issues and even resolve the stagnation of a country. He believed the key to the issue is not to fundamentally eliminate the existence of conflict, but rather how to manage conflict. Because conflict is inevitably present, it cannot be artificially eliminated. In the face of such value conflicts, humans live in this society where everyone is responsible to each other. And the prince is more than just an ordinary citizen, should bear higher social responsibility and social obligations. So in general morality, when conflicting with the overall interests of the country, the monarch must abandon general morality and choose social interests instead. If for personal moral reputation, neglecting the interests of society, this is an unfit monarch. It also goes against what he advocates in the monarch theory. Prudent conduct advocated. This is a greater immorality. Here, the monarch he speaks of is not the owner of the country, but the executor of national interests. In The Prince, Machiavelli once mentioned placing the interests of a certain class above the interests of the country. This is corruption. In a corrupt society, people no longer respect the law. People no longer follow morals. People will develop the bad habit of being enslaved by others. The wealth gap will become even more disparate. If power is held absolutely by someone, he believes this system is not the ideal monarchy in his mind, but rather an authoritarian regime that needs to be overthrown by the people. Only by launching an armed revolution to establish a republic can this corruption he speaks of be completely eliminated. Of course, due to space constraints, I can only discuss a few key points through 2 or 3 videos discussing the key points. In fact, most misunderstandings about Machiavelli stem from immature and stagnant political concepts. In the process of understanding political philosophy, we must not understand politics like watching a movie. Who is good and who is bad? Which ideology is evil? Machiavelli's reputation has actually been rehabilitated in academic circles, while public dissatisfaction with him mostly stems from statist rationalism and conflicts with classical liberalism. Conflicts are objectively present, but the existence of conflicts cannot directly negate Machiavelli's academic value. Even when criticizing Machiavelli's ideas, we still need to be realistic, rather than defending our own beliefs by staging some vulgar scenes to vent emotions. Next episode, let's talk about the founder of British experimental science, Francis Bacon. Follow me for a popular view of philosophy. Friends, see you next time.